Welcome back. As you can see, I've played some camera angle games here. Figured you would get a new perspective and it would free me up. I can now move my hands around, reach for tools and stuff, and look directly at my work, where before it was like one of those surgeons that's operating on a patient off to their left while they're looking off to the right into a screen, a computer screen. I know they can do it on brains and stuff now, but it was messing me up. So we'll do this, or at least take this for a test drive and see how it goes. So the project, as you know by now, I gotta remember where the damn thing's pointed all the time now. Okay, the project here is to make this stem look like it was made in an earlier time or a later one, when they paid better attention to shaping details. And in this case, we're going to round over from about there all the way down. It's kind of got square sides. It's too thick in the bite zone, and there's a big lump right here. We've already gotten the slot figured out, so I'll talk about the tools as I pick them up and get started on a step, and then as that becomes repetitious, either speed up the camera or whatever I'll end up doing. But so you don't have to actually watch the whole process, but you'll see some of each step along the way and can extrapolate. So for this kind of a thing, for the sake of ease of controlling the workpiece, I leave it in the stummel. And in this particular case, we're kind of in luck in that we are going to refinish this stummel anyway. We know that. That's one of the things we're planning on doing. Therefore, if we scuff up here sometime, that normally you'd protect this with your life and make sure that's never messed with unless absolutely necessary. In this case, if we scuff up the shank some, it won't make any difference. Now, we don't want to go gouging it and stuff, but it takes some of the worry out of it. So I tend to work in cases like this on the finer points first and work my way backwards. It's just a personal preference. I couldn't make a case for why that's better or worse. It is possible, if you look at this, and it might be something you can see on the screen, probably not. How are we doing this? Yeah, it turns out that the problem with the thickness of the bite zone is a lazy round over. And here's much better if I show you a drawing real quick. Here is the back side of the button as you look down as you look at it this way, right? And the bite zone itself is humped like that, meaning that material should be removed, but not so much on the edges. So don't just jump in and start cranking on stuff till it's the dimension you want. Make sure you know where the mistake was made, or I keep calling it a mistake, where they were rushed. Understand what the problem is before you try to correct it. That's step one, is a thorough understanding. So with that in mind, I'm going to take a number one file. They're called pillar files, which means that they are smooth on the edges and have the texture on the flats. And here we go. And I know just where it needs to be thinner, which is in the middle, and we'll get her going here. Now at first, until you really get the hang of filing, you want to probably would wrap some tape around, Scotch tape, the thin stuff, about the file width away from it so you don't put a gouge in the back here. But if after you've done it for a while, you'll get the feel for it to where that's almost completely unnecessary. And anything to make it less complicated, I'm in favor of. This is a number 1 file for anybody who might be interested. Now notice that you don't use a file like sandpaper where you scrub it back and forth. You can, but the file is not going to work for you as well as if you go in only one direction, and it forces you to slow down and think before you do it. You're kind of in better mental control as well as better physical control when you do it this way. Now normally you'd say, well, wait a minute, you're jacking this up, you're putting a flat spot in the stem. No, it's rounded. It's just, it was peaked there, so it should be closer to being the arch shape that we want. And as I look down the length of it, it's getting there. And good file technique is to not necessarily just use your arm with hinged at the elbow or the shoulder, but to kind of lock the angle of your elbow and then sway your body side to side. And it seems like it's a little extravagant, and anybody watching would say, what the hell, is he dancing to the music in his head or what? No, it gives you better control, and you'll end up with more even curves, and nothing bad comes out of that, and only good. So I recommend it. And we're almost there. And before going any farther, we got to keep track of the thickness. And sure enough, we're down to 170 from 181. So just taking off that little bump in the center of the bite zone there has knocked that down more than a third of the distance we got to go. So I'm going to now do the same thing on the other side wherever I see a high spot, and sure enough, the same person, I'm not surprised, the same person did both sides of this naturally. And I'm going to leave the stummel off. I noticed it's something of a loose fit, and I don't want it falling off and bouncing on the floor, so I'll just hold it like this. Keep your files clean. I use a brass brush. And we're gonna, same thing you just saw me do on the one side, I'm doing now on the other. Again, I recommend that you use some super thin tape to guard against getting the back edge of the file cutting a notch across here, because then you're going to have to chase that out and you'll end up with a scoop spot. And unless you're very confident with your the amount of twist you put in it, because I'm not putting equal pressure on this, I'm actually putting slightly more pressure on my away side. But that's kind of like a learned thing, and I don't think it's probably how you should start if you're new to the filing game. Okay. And sure enough, that's now the arch of this is pretty close to even. Let's see what we've got for thickness. And yep, we're down to 163, 164. So we're coming down fast. Now, important, don't file it to your final dimension because you're still got to finish sand it in several steps, and that's going to reduce it still more. So you want to allow for that and leave a little extra material with the files, and then slowly sneak up on your final dimension. Alrighty, I'm just looked up and saw the timer, and I'm going to go ahead and shut off the camera for this to, first I want to kind of see how this looks on the screen from the camera being in such a funny spot. And it also is a logical place to stop in terms of, we'll be doing something else here in just a minute. I don't want to begin that and then suddenly stop and start somewhere else. So give it a go here and be back in a minute.